is the dynamic between the family members and the patient, the person in the family, and this doesn't just apply to addiction or substance abuse. Families have dysfunction for all kinds of reasons. There's behavioral things that look really bad, and it disrupts the continuity of the family unit. And it doesn't have to take place under the same household, right? And so, like most of us, we become adult addicts, and we may not even be living at home. But the dynamic is there because our families aren't going to abandon us. They're not going to leave us. So the principles are the same, the solutions are the same, but our families and a patient are having the same chaotic experience with two completely different perspectives. And that's what we're going to break down tonight, what the family is experiencing and what the patient is experiencing. And it's hard to overcome the principal characteristic of addiction, substance abuse, even dysfunctional mental illness behaviors is bad behavior. So it's very easy, society still has a hard time with this one. It's very easy to look at the bad behavior and believe it's a moral issue, it's an I don't care issue, it's an apathetic issue. If they would just get their act together, then we would all be okay. But of course, that's not what's happening. Addiction, substance abuse, these are real brain disorders. It just leads to the primary characteristic of bad behavior. But if we keep addressing the bad behavior, then we can't get better. We have to address it as a brain issue, a brain disorder, while taking responsibility for ourselves. So as a patient, I've been on both sides of that. As a recovering patient, if I don't do the things that I need to do for me today, then I will get sicker. I still think I'm a little, we were joking about the mower thing last night. Obviously, I still got some issues going on in my thinking. I still have some distorted thinking. Okay, I lost my train of thought. So let's just start. Our first bullet point. Well, already said that. Let's go to number 3. These different responses, these different perspectives shape the way we react in this situation. Remember, it's always in the back of our mind, even though we may be taught that addiction is it's a brain disorder, it is a disease, it's genetic, all those are factors, but it's hard to move past the bad behavior aspect of it. And then as family members, we're dealing with one set of issues, believing that the addict has the same perspective, and vice versa, which keeps this dynamic going. It just keeps it going. Nobody understands the other side. If only they understood what we were going through. Can't you see what you're doing to yourself? Can't you see what you're doing to us? Why don't you just stop? Why can't you just act right? Why can't you just whatever? And that's why it never really gets resolved, because we're focusing on the symptomatic behavior of what's underneath. When we deal with that, then everybody gets to heal. The families get on their healing journey. The patient is on their healing journey, and you guys know for a fact that it's not a race to the finish, right? It takes time. We're rebuilding, and like I talk about a lot, is some of us aren't rebuilding anything. We're needing to build entirely new. And it has nothing to do with, how you were raised, what socioeconomic group you come from, blah, blah, blah. It has nothing to do with it. Because, I'll finish talking about me. You can still live a life of self-protection and survival mode at a very young age, even though you have an amazing childhood. That's one of the ways we reject that idea. I don't have any pain to look at. I don't have any trauma to look like. I had a great childhood, great parents, great this, got to do everything I wanted. There's nothing to see here. But what we're doing in that is we're picking out situations. We're picking out our life experiences. What we're not looking at in that is our interpretation, our perspectives of life experiences. And so that's where we kind of all get stuck. We all bring that to the table in the family unit, and we just get stuck. So let's start with, I kind of broke this down into particular categories and did them side by side, so it's really easy to recognize. So we'll start with fears. And remember, this is a limited group. We've got this in full detail. Some of you guys actually have been given this book. I think you have it. It's called, we recently changed the title. It's called Loving Your Addict Without Losing Yourself. Yeah. Anyway, it's a great book, and if anybody wants it, I'll shoot it to you. Okay. Here's what the family is experiencing, and I mean just in the probably even in the lead up. There's probably a lot of this long before use or drinking begin. Remember, we have to go through 9 stages before we ever start drinking or using. So it could start at a very young age. We, as a family member, we know things are getting out of sorts. We worry about the future. Oh my gosh, if something doesn't happen soon, they're going to end up like those other people. They're going to end up like those other guys. And then here we are, fast forward into early adulthood, and maybe a few years of chaos under your belt, and family members are experiencing intense anxiety. Now, the patient has anxiety too, but with family members, it can be extra intense. Waiting for that call. Is this the call? You go through periods where they don't hear from us for a while, and all of a sudden the phone rings at a time where it doesn't usually ring, or the doorbell rings late at night. Just all these little unexpected things. These end up being trauma triggers for family members, which can last well into recovery. That's really important to look at if you're a family member, and it's usually, I hear that most reported by wives and moms. Right, that's one that's hard to move past. So it's always going to be there. So if you're the child or the spouse, then as recovering addicts, we need to be aware of that. There's not much else we can do about it other than just be sensitive to it. But we can't fix them. We can't heal them. We can't make them feel better, and we certainly can't demand it. Man, you mean after all this time, you still get nervous? Good Lord, man. That was one of my lines. The anytime crisis at any moment. The anytime crisis could happen in the moment. There can be this ongoing expectation waiting for the other shoe to drop. Man, it's been, because remember, we adapt to the chaos. So in early recovery, middle recovery, later stages of recovery, we go through periods where everything's comfortable. There hasn't been a crisis in a while, not a legitimate one. And we will, if we're not aware of what's happening, and we're not aware of this, oftentimes the subconscious expectation that this doesn't seem right, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, something bad is about to happen, we will unwittingly create a crisis. Happens all the time, and we can all fall victim to that. That's why it's so important to be aware of it. That's not an unusual place to be. It's a very normal place to be, and the recovering person can do it to themselves. Our family members can do it to themselves. The other one was doubting change, under the intense anxiety part. Just doubting change. Well, we've seen this before. Okay, so what? Woohoo! You got some sobriety. We've been here before. We know how this ends, which is classic trauma. That's what PTSD looks like in our families. Now, remember the bad behavior or the expression of what's going on internally. That kind of sounds ugly. It sounds angry. It sounds nasty, but it's real. It's centered in that overwhelming fear that it's just not going to work out. We were talking about the opposite of that last night under the personality traits. Everything is going to work out. Well, the opposite of that is nothing's going to work out. It's too good to be true. I think that's an indicator of how long and how deep you've been in the chaos, right? And I think most of us as family members have been in it for a while, right? Nobody gets to this point after a little 6 months of chaos, right? It's the addiction cycle has been there for a very long time. Now we may just now becoming aware of it, but you can look beyond, the last 4 months, 6 months, even 12 months, 24 months, whatever it was, and you recognize some things. And it's really important as family members to not get too caught up in that. We want to live in the solution now. There's a solution, because it's easy to go back in our mind. We may never even talk about it, but it's easy to go back in our mind and kind of maybe cherry pick some things and bring them into the present. Well, but do you remember that one time and the thing and the, which isn't healthy for either of us either. But if we don't know how to respond, remember over here, this pain and these perspectives and these fears have determined how we react to protect ourselves. Both parties are protecting themselves emotionally. And that feels like a sense of control. Well, there's this thing and I just don't know. And it in a sick way, in an unhealthy way, it does help us to reassure ourselves. It's an unhealthy way of self-soothing. Think about it like that. So what if we could learn some healthier ways to self-soothe? Okay, well, let me keep going. Under the family fears, number 2 is embarrassment. Hey, we haven't seen Bob in a while. Where's Bob? Oh, he's on a mission trip. He's doing something. He's just taking some time out. He's whatever. And we find ourselves making excuses because we're scared to death of the public humiliation. What will people think? It's really amazing, too, when you look at some statistics, and I don't know what they are now. I haven't probably looked in about a year, but it probably hasn't changed much. It was basically 4 out of 5, 8 out of 10 families are impacted by addiction, substance abuse, mental illness in some form or fashion. So the goal, if we want to heal and we want to grow, is to be transparent about that. You gotta have to choose your people. I'm not saying you gotta dump everything off on the grocery store clerk every time you're buying groceries. Oh, that Bob, boy, we just can't, we never know what's going to happen, and he's shooting dope now, and we don't know, I'm not saying that. But we do need to be willing to open up to our people, our trusted people. We need to be transparent. If for no other reason than to make it known that you're available to other people. Because that's what you find out. When you start opening up about your issues, you realize you're surrounded by people that are going through the same stuff, or they've been through the same stuff or similar stuff. It doesn't have to be identical. Overdosing. What family, especially in this day and age? Good Lord, man. What's the overdose rate now? I know just with opioids, it's like 120,000. Is that annual or is that monthly? Anyway, it's a lot, and you take in alcohol, and you take in. People think you can't overdose on meth. That's a lie. People think you can't overdose on cocaine. That's a lie. And now, of course, they're squeezing fentanyl into everything, and it's just a matter of time before they figure out how to get it into alcohol. It's so dangerous. People are overdosing from remember the old K2. Now it's the gas station heroin. It's never ending. That's why overdoses are just skyrocketing. So that's not just a fear. That's a legitimate reality. It very well could happen. Some of you guys maybe have either experienced an overdose, or you certainly know someone who has but survived it. Some people overdose and they don't survive it. Right? I mean, that's why we're here. And then the financial strain. But think about that. I'm sorry, let me finish that thought on overdosing. The patient doesn't even have to get close to overdosing. Because it's a realistic possibility, the families are constantly thinking about it. So what happens when we go through periods where we're disconnected, right? We haven't communicated, our families don't know where we are or what we're doing, they haven't talked to us in 3 days, they know that we're going through a bad period. Well, that's the first thing that's going to come into your mind. Oh my God, are they alone? Are they with anyone that loves them? Are they in a safe place? Are they on the street? Are they in the hospital? Have they been arrested? Have they been in a car wreck? Are they stuck in a ditch somewhere where maybe in the middle of the woods? Can we get to them? How will we know? It's really interesting because as a patient, as an addict, I think in early recovery, we don't minimize our family's pain on purpose. We really don't know the depth of it because we've been in our own sickness. And I'm going to get to that. But these are things that are really important. I don't mean from a perspective of shame, but a perspective of reality so we can heal. You know, we go, I know, I've hurt my family and all, but, you know, they've forgiven me. Oh, but that's good that they've forgiven us. But if we don't allow ourselves to touch some of that pain that we've caused, we can't heal. Not shame, you know, human. Human is vulnerable. Human is, man, I've been sick for a really long time. I want to get better. So I'm willing to do some things that'll help me to get better, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, the financial strain. Now let's move to the patient. I know we got a lot of ground to cover. Under the category of fears, here's what the patient is going through. Their fears, exposure, right? Being found out. That's the third basic fear. Getting caught for something that I did or said. Getting caught, or here's another way to think of that one. Being found out that I'm only human. Right? Remember that shameful, shameless dynamic. We either see ourselves as subhuman or we're trying to perform superhuman to compensate. Right? It's that, oh my God, I'm such a loser. I'm no good. I'm never going to get this thing. I always ruin everything. To, you know what? I just need to go it alone. Get out of my way. Let me do it my way. Now I got to be perfect. Because we're so afraid that being found out will just ruin everything. Plus, it does kind of hurt our ability to manipulate. A fear of failure, that's where that shame, so much of that shame comes from. Disappointment, not being enough. Fear of withdrawals, that's a big one. In early recovery, I know a lot of people, including myself, that delayed their own recovery experience because the fear of withdrawal is so overwhelming that we will procrastinate it. We will put it off. We will put it off. We will put it off. I just, the idea of being that sick just scares the heck out of us. And so it will keep us stuck in that cycle, even though intellectually we don't want to do it anymore. We don't want to be in this cycle anymore. But, you know, imagine how confusing that is for families. This is what's going on with the addict, but we don't know how to express that. God, if we could just express that, we could get help a lot sooner. We don't know how to express that because we're trying to be superhuman, so we're still trying to figure everything out. No, I'm going to figure it all out. I'll come up with a plan. I'll figure it out. Eventually, I just got to keep using today. Got to keep using today. Got to keep using today. So don't underestimate the fear of withdrawal. And then, of course, number 6, the road ahead. You know, when I was writing this out today, I was trying to just put myself back in those places in my early journey. And the road ahead, it seems like an impossibility. I mean, we're not really even sure what it's supposed to look like. So we bring to the table our very limited perspective, which is why it's so easy for us to say, you know what, I just need to quit using and get back to work. I just need to stop and then begin again. And we've even tried that. You know, I think most of us have tried that in the past. It doesn't work like that. We have to stop, learn, and rebuild, and then we can begin again. with an entirely new foundation. But the road ahead, the idea that I got to follow someone else's course of action, scares the daylights out of us. Because remember, part of our survival mode, the patient survival mode, is going it alone. I got to figure it out. And here's the amazing thing, is we can actually pull that off for a while. Right? Which is a conversation we have a lot. That's why you see in your past some amazing accomplishments, some amazing achievements, followed by more crash and burn. But we bring that same thinking to early recovery. You know what? I just need to get back to work. I just need to start exercising again, get my car fixed, I'm going to be fine, and then boom, boom, boom. But that's really driven by this fear of the road ahead. It's unfamiliar to us, which is a good thing, but we don't see it like that yet. Okay, so let's come over here to the weight of shame. The shame aspect in this crazy dynamic. The family is their perspective on shame is guilt and blame, self-blame. The guilt, man, it's it must be our fault. We've done something wrong. We've messed something up a long time ago, and we will spend hours looking into the past, and we'll pick things out, and we'll go, yeah, I'll bet that was it. I knew something was a little off, and I wish we'd have done something different, etc., etc. And then we just take all the blame, which drives our rescuing, right? So if we're operating out of guilt and self-blame, then in the addiction cycle, family members, we will try to compensate for that, which is why we tend to say yes an awful lot, right? Because the only reason they're having difficulty is because of me anyway, so I've got to make up for it. I'll go ahead and get the car, and I'll go ahead and pay all that debt, and I'll go ahead and get a hotel room, and I'll go ahead and do this and do that, and provide and rescue and provide and rescue. Which is why, as family members, we've got to stop operating out of guilt and blame, because it's not true anyway. Right? We would never take blame if our family member had cancer. We would never say, you know what? It's got to be something I did when they were 12. We're talking about a brain disease mixed with a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's why that hasn't worked. It just exacerbates the cycle. The questioning ourselves, the public perception, which we kind of, that falls under the fear too. What's the world going to think? What's my church people going to think? What's my neighbors going to think? What's the other family members going to think? And so we tend to keep it in our own little circle of pain. That's a good way to think of it. The emotional burden will just take it all on. Let's see. I'm gonna kind of start jumping around. But this one here, struggling to manage the chaos. So ultimately, if as a family dynamic, if we've been in this process for a while, because we'll operate out of the fear and the guilt and the shame and the self-blame, we will seek to manage the chaos. We'll try to minimize the disaster. Well, at least they've got a roof over their head. At least this, at least that. And so what we're willing to do is just kind of accept, we'll say mediocrity. It's not about them getting better. It's not about the addict getting better. It's not about that family's healing. It's about managing the chaos, which is a normal instinct. That's not a bad thing. That's what comes naturally, because that's what we do really well, especially mama bears. Right? I know my mom reminds me so much of you, was such a master coordinator, a master problem solver. She was superwoman times 10, which that's just who she was. As an addict, well, whether we realize it or not, we learn how to manipulate that. And I'm getting to that. Let's move over to the struggle, the family desperation. So when families are in total desperation and don't know what to do, trying to manage the chaos, trying to minimize that, minimize this, We will my girls used to call it helicopter parenting, right? That's what it reminds me of. We will try to over control. We try to manage or monitor and manage their behaviors, whether that's checking cell phones, checking the comings and goings, verifying this, verifying that. I'm going to expand on that in a minute. Manage outcomes that we can't control. That just reading that sounds dysfunctional. And then the bargaining. Well, if you'll do this, we'll do that. And it seems reasonable, but it doesn't ever work out because the addict manipulates it. Okay, I'll tell you what. We'll go ahead and we'll do this. And if you'll do these things, then, we talk about this all the time. The family member will do the thing, but then the addict never follows through. Or maybe starts to follow through. It's like, yeah, I'll mow half the yard, but we always kind of fizzle out. Well, there's a solution to that, and that's flipping that around. But I want to go back to like monitoring and things like that. Remember, in early recovery, as the recovering addict, we need to be willing to allow a little bit of that in reasonable ways. If you want to help your family with their trauma, that's what healing looks like. And it does, there can be a lot of bitterness and resentment that comes with that because, as the addict, we may go through periods where it's like, geez, I've been doing everything right for a week. I can't believe you don't trust me yet. The problem with that is we can do really well for short periods of time, but until that new behavior gets solidified, we will always default back into the old. The solidification of our new way of thinking, of our new way of living, that is what's key. Solidify. That's why, you guys know the phases. That's why we got to be willing to push through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then we get to enjoy phase 4. We have a long history of doing phase 1 really well. You start the new job, you start a new church, start a new thing, start a new relationship, start recovery, and we're really big on presenting ourselves in the best way possible. I'm good to go. I don't really have a lot of problems. Everything's cool. I want to show everybody how funny and smart and talented I am, which can all be true. But then when that wears off and we get to that point where there's a true vulnerability required to continue in that relationship, we will sabotage ourselves so that we can start over. Begin again syndrome. I want to begin again because we're really good at beginning. Whatever it is. We're really good at beginning a new business. We're really good at beginning putting that bicycle together. We're really good at beginning working on a fuel pump. We don't have a long history of pushing through the difficult grind of it. Well, that is what recovery is, and that's how we get there. So in the beginning, I was really just trying to make the point about trauma. If our family says, okay, yeah, you can borrow the car, but I really need you to check in with me, when you get there. Okay, well, that's a reasonable request. And even though it might make you feel like a 4-year-old, we need to be willing to accept that condition. If you want to borrow the car, you don't have to borrow the car or whatever it is. This is the key. What I'm talking about, this is the key to change. It's part of the new strategy that as family members, if we will implement this new strategy, we will get new results. And I know that can be, at some point, we've got to be, as family members, we've got to get reasonable about it because you will not manage them into success. At some point, we have the saying about the rope. At some point, we need to give them enough rope to hang themselves. And if we're time it right with guidance, we shouldn't be making that decision, not based on feeling, but based on behavior, based on evidence. If we'll give them a little bit of rope to hang themselves, what usually happens, and I mean like 98% of the time, is they don't hang themselves. Then it solidifies and they grow. But that's how deep that trauma is because we've been here before. Oh, we've been here before. They're just gonna shoot themselves in the foot Okay, I'm losing my place. Um, the patient, this is under shame. Patient is dealing with toxic shame. Like, like the depth of shame can be. It's hard. It's hard to articulate. Just toxic. It is brewing. It is simmering all the time, which is why when we present, we don't present that. We present the opposite. We present that I've got it all together. We present that I'm angry. It's I'm a victim. It's your fault. You won't do this thing. The only reason I got my car repossessed is because you wouldn't help me with the payment. The only reason the electric company turned off my electricity is because you wouldn't make the payment for me. You don't love me. We get really good at being a victim of injustice. And all of that is driven by that deep, deep toxic shame. It's not real. So, but if we think it's real and that's how we're interacting, we're never going to get out of this cycle until eventually we get divorced, we die, we whatever, we overdose, we get run over by a bus, whatever. That's how it ends, but it doesn't have to end like that. Self-hatred, self-loathing. Um, remember, put yourself in the family place. That in early recovery, as family members, if we're participating in this process, we learn that, and that can be shocking. I think it is shocking to most family members to hear that our loved one can't stand themselves, loathes themselves, hates themselves, so disappointed in themselves. Right? That's like news. Wait, you don't act like that. You've been acting the opposite way. Yeah, that's survival mode. That's the survival mode. Remember, come over here. Remember, under the fear column, exposure is one of our biggest fears, being found out. Well, in order to recover, in order to heal, we've got to become more vulnerable and allow that, right? We've got to be willing to show that. We don't have to cover it up anymore. Uh, let's see. Okay, I pretty much covered that. Number 3 was live in the vicious cycle of pain, which I just described. So here we are. You can kind of see if you can visualize it. We're just kind of stuck in this ongoing cycle, and it's all symptomatic. We're not really addressing the real issues. We're just addressing the external outcomes, and by addressing, I mean trying to manage. Right? We're trying to fix. So the patient hopelessness. Okay, I'm moving back over the struggle here. The patient hopelessness. This is we'll promise to change, but don't. Remember, the last time or a time when you were in a down period. Everything's out in the open now. It's kind of a relief. You don't have to fight so hard anymore. The people that love us the most are aware, and everybody's coming together. But we hang on to this idea that we do want to change. It's real. We want to change. I've never met an addict who loves being an addict. You may hear people say that, but that's just not true. That's a helpless person. That's a person who doesn't believe there's a solution. And so we just kind of own it. Oh, no, I'll never change. I love this. Well, that's just dumb. Nobody loves being an addict. We all want to move past it. But if we don't know how, and maybe we've tried multiple times, it's easy to become very hopeless. So the idea of change is really good. But we've made that promise before. Heck, we've made that promise to ourselves. Okay, I'm really going to do it this time. I'm going to get really serious. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Da, 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 da. And we can do it for a while. That's that shamelessness. We can pull it off for a while. But then we fail again. So it's easy to be hopeless at the beginning because we've already tried it anyway. And nothing ever works out. And I've already read that book. And I already went to those meetings. And I already whatever. Hope, just life in general, man, hope is everything. If we don't have it, then we need to borrow it, right? That's why you always hear that. If you can't love yourself just yet, just believe in someone else who can love you until you can love yourself. And that's a crazy. I remember hearing that early on. And I thought, what does that even mean? How is that even possible? But if we'll tap into that a little bit, it works. Um, so we remember we're under the struggle, the patient struggle. We hide our actions. We lie. We feel powerless. We try more willpower, only to fail again. And let me kind of um, explain this. When we're talking about fail, it doesn't even necessarily have to be returning to use, right? Failing is just defaulting back into a life we don't want to live. Our relationships are in conflict. We're kind of living a roller coaster. You may not have drank or used anything, but we're still not really functioning in a way we want to function. So we'll try more willpower. I just need to toughen up. I just need to start running 3 miles a day. I just need to get a different location. We were talking about that yesterday. I just need a different situation. And then we can zero in and, I'm going to get this time. I need to pray harder, whatever that is. I'm going to pray harder. I'm going to do more of this thing, which doesn't work with cancer. Why would it work with a brain disease? It doesn't. But it does help us to feel a little sense of control for a short period of time. And then we just repeat because we're stuck in default mode. Until we replace default, we'll always be in this cycle. We're moving to the other side of the board now. Okay, so let's get down to feelings. How much time I got? Okay, good. Family operates on feelings. Patient operates on feelings. It's been said that addiction, substance abuse, it's a feelings disease. Absolutely, it's a feelings disease. We are driven by feelings. Early on, let me back up. Throughout the crazy cycle, the chaos cycle, every time there's an opportunity for the families to step in, we're thinking about feelings. The patient is thinking about feelings. How can we help them feel better? Well, let's get them this, let's do that. The rescuing, that's what rescuing is. If you define rescuing the patient, it involves helping them to feel better. Believing that if we can take away all their stress, take away all their worries, give them everything that they want so they can be happy, then they will succeed. And it only works for a short period of time, right? So I think about some of the crazy things my mom was willing to do, and stuff I've seen, and it's all the same. It's all so very consistent. Like, okay, well, we're going to get them a car, we're going to get them an apartment, we're going to do this, we're going to get some new clothes, we're going to whatever it is. Give them a bank card, and that lasts about a month, maybe 2 weeks. Here's a bank card. We just put $500 on it. It's gone that day. Nothing's changed, but it does help everybody feel better. And in a rational situation, that would work, right? Our loved one goes through a difficult time, and you know what? Let's set them up. Let's prop them up a little bit. Let's help them get this, and we'll do that. And then a rational brain would really be grateful for that, recognize the significance of it, and be able to build on it. The addict brain does not work like that. The addict brain says, whew, I pulled it off. I got away with it. It wasn't that bad. And will immediately begin returning to old behavior because the thinking hasn't changed. The thinking is the same. And we were talking about that last night. That sense of entitlement. I want what I want when I want it. Just because I want something, I'm supposed to have it. Everything will work out fine, et cetera, et cetera. You guys remember those. So that's why that doesn't work. And okay. Let me do these two under the feelings. It's not just rescuing though. It can also come with the bargaining, the threats, the lectures, like your, which makes sense. I mean, if we're still addressing it as a behavioral problem, remember it shows it shows as a behavioral symptom, but it's not a behavioral problem. It just looks bad. So, like you might sit your 12-year-old down and give them a butt chewing or whatever. A lecture. Look, we're done with this, and it's time to get your head out, and you got to it's time to, and that will never work. It doesn't work. In fact, it just adds to the humiliation. It adds to the shame. It adds to that deep inner voice inside the patient that is constantly telling us, "You're not good enough." And then now, whatever, our parent, a family, a coach, a teacher, someone just confirmed that. That's what the addict hears, even though it's very well intentioned and it will work with a rational brain, but it will not work with the addict brain. The patient, feelings wise, is governed by the withdrawal, perhaps, manipulating to feel better, isolating. We cover this a lot. Isolation is like the final go-to behavior to regain a sense of control. So I'm feeling this, I'm feeling anxious, worried, this isn't going to work out, this isn't going to work out. The easiest thing, the fastest thing we can do is just withdraw and isolate. And we regain a little bit of sense of feeling. Right? I don't have to live out there in the world. I don't have to put up with that stuff. Even though it's not productive, but we get there. That's what recovery is about. And so we just stay in this vicious cycle. And this is what continually increases the tension in the family. Why won't you do this? How come you won't do that? If only you would do this. If only you would do that. Cycle, cycle, cycle. And keep this in mind. This can be happening when we're not even in communication with each other. These are just thoughts in our head, just spinning around all day. Golly, man, if they would only do this. Why aren't they doing that? If only I'm so disappointed about that last thing. It becomes this mental obsession for both of us, the family member and the addict. Let's see. The solution on that, simply put, is that we've got to recognize it. That's the point of all of this information. If we can begin to recognize what's actually happening and be willing to address that in a therapeutic way, in a realistic way, then we can really break the cycle. Which is why recovery is not a maybe thing. I think, I know a lot of people think that, especially if you've been in it for a long time. Well, you just never know. Well, we tried this and we tried that and we got them this and they went to this trip, and you never know. They gotta want it. Well, I've never met an addict who didn't want it, but I've met a lot of addicts who lacked a lot of hope, etc. I'll save the rest of that for another topic. But when we come together as a family, our success rates shoot through the roof. Because now everybody can have an opportunity to heal because we can recognize what's really happening. So let's come over here to take a look at what success looks like. Families cannot regulate us into success. It will not happen. There's a big difference between regulation and needing some conditions to help you heal. That's not what we're talking about. Trying to control outcomes, that's regulating. Coming up with 50 ironclad rules for the addict's behavior won't work for multiple reasons. But while I'm on it, let me point this out. Addicts are masters of compliance. So when someone else, this is why we can go through a real short rehab experience and leave with straight A's and then get drunk on the way home. We're really good when someone else is telling us what to do. When someone says, okay, this is what I expect. You need to do this and do that. And so for the family, we think we're controlling, we're going to control them into change. But for the patient, we're just following orders. and doing it really well. And so it gives everybody this false belief after a period of time. Well, shoot, all is good. I've done everything they asked. And then the family's like, they've done everything I've asked. We're good to go. Here's the keys, here's cash, here's whatever. And then guess what happens? And you don't have to take my word for it, because if you've been in it for a while, you've already experienced pieces of that. It's so important for families to participate in the recovery process in certain ways, as appropriate. And I don't mean showing up occasionally for a family day, but I mean being willing to educate yourself. What's really happening? Reading right material. Being willing to say, like in this environment, at least watch the groups if you don't make it to the groups. Being willing to look at yourself throughout this process. So what's going on with me? It's not our family's fault. But families have their issues. They have their set of pain points. They get to heal too. Now, is it necessary? Do families have to be a part of the recovery process in order for the addict to get better? No. But when families are participating in the process as best they can with a willingness to heal, not just wait, then, like I said, success rates skyrocket. And if you have this attitude or this mindset, you gotta ditch it. Don't think, well, I'm not the one with the problem. If Johnny would just get sober, if he would just get better, we'd all get back to normal. It doesn't work like that. So what ends up happening is the addict can chase recovery and get better, and then ends up being the most healthy person in the family. And I've got countless case studies of that, where now the person in recovery is the one everybody's calling for advice, because the other family members are still in their own dysfunction. It was never about the addict, but the addict becomes the identified patient. So it's easy to cover up everybody else's pain issues, behavioral issues, lack of addressing their own trauma issues from their own life journey. It's easy to say the addict is all of our problem, and if they would just get better, then we could all be normal. It won't work like that. Let's see. I'm going to kind of bounce around on this one, but reasonable expectations is a good one. Well, how do we know what's reasonable? Because we're following advice now. Whatever, it's that old saying, if the addict could fix themselves, they would have already done it. If the family dynamic could solve this problem, it would have already done it. So we need to adopt this mindset that we don't know how, but we're willing to learn. And so I don't know what a reasonable expectation is. I think they should be back at work tomorrow at 6 a.m. I don't know what a reasonable expectation is. I think since they're not using, everything's supposed to be perfect now. But if we're willing to learn what reasonable expectations are supposed to look like, then everybody gets to heal, everybody gets to grow. Accountability, not rescue. And we spend a lot of time on this. Okay, let me elaborate on this one, and then I'll start winding it down. So accountability, what does that look like? We need a value for value exchange now. Because like I was talking about in the past, or a minute ago, where our families can bargain with us, maybe they don't realize they're bargaining, but we, the addict, will manipulate that without even meaning to manipulate it, because our thinking is distorted. Okay, yes, we will help you get that new car, we will help you, get some new clothes so you can go job hunting, we will help you with something, but we want to see you going to those meetings, we want to see you go to rehab, we want to see you doing your counseling sessions, we want to see you come over and mow our yard. We want you to do something. Okay, yes, I agree to that. That sounds great. And then our family will go ahead and take care of their side of the bargain. And then we'll start to take care of ours, but then we fizzle out. And then everybody, we just exacerbated the pain cycle all over again. And then it becomes the behavioral thing. Why do you keep doing this to us? Why do you know? But that's part of the sickness. So to help the addict reprogram is the addict's behavior has to come first. Yes, of course we'll help you make your car payment next month. We don't want you to lose your car, then you have a hard time getting to work and all that stuff. We want to support you, but we have some expectations. And this here's one I hear a lot. Families will say, well, we have to keep making the car payment because we co-signed on it. And if it gets repossessed, then it'll hurt our credit. But that's an easy fix. Here's how you deal with that. So it's a car payment, great. Yes, you're going to help them with the car payment next month, but you're expecting them to do certain things. If they don't do it, you can go ahead and make the car payment, but they don't get the car. And that seems really tough. I'm not sure I could do that one with my girls. And thank God I haven't been put in that position. But a lot of people have. We'll keep the car. We're going to put it over here and we'll put it in the garage. But until you start doing something different, we want to help you get better. We don't want to help you die. And as family members, that's the attitude we've got to take. Because don't think it won't happen, because that's what my family said. That won't happen to us. And then it did. So we have to be very dramatic and assertive in our accountability. So you just did two things. You protected your credit while moving your addict closer towards accountability. It's amazing how it works. When the family, I'm just going to jump over here. When the families take care of them, or maybe I should say learn how to, right? As family, we're not sure what to do. We've been chasing the addict around, solving all their problems. I think that's, and maybe you guys could speak to that. That's probably one of the hardest things to do, is to be able to pull back and start taking care of yourself. You know, what is, and you need to develop that. What is self-care? What will it look like if, as a mom or a dad or a sibling or a spouse, what would that look like if I'm actually putting me first? If I'm going to take care of me first, regardless of what my loved one is doing, what should that look like? And it could be as simple as whatever, get your hair done, take a day off and go hang out at the lake, spend some time with your friends, spend more time with God. Whatever the things that you used to enjoy doing that you recognize you have put on hold because of this crisis, start working those old things back into your life. Well, but if I do that, then they're going to go crazy and the addict will relapse and they'll da. You have to let that happen, but it's okay to have boundaries. Well, if they do that, I'm done. I got to part company. We're not going to keep doing this. It's like if you had diabetes and you don't know you have diabetes, but you keep having these seizures and all these crazy health issues, and you get taken to the hospital and you get a diagnosis of diabetes, and they tell you how to treat it. And if you'll treat it, you will get better. It's the same thing with addiction. Okay, when we're in our chaos, nobody's really sure what's happening. We just know it's crazy and there's drugs involved and some booze, and all we know is just crazy and nobody really knows what the solution is. But once recovery begins, and we actually, each of us, the family and the patient, have a solution, it's now up to us to follow that solution. So if we have a solution at our hands, but we will not follow it, well, that's an accountability problem, because we've been given an answer, we've been given solutions, but we're ignoring it. Why would we do that? Well, because until change occurs, we're still stuck in our old default thinking. So we will do that in early recovery, and as family members, we need to allow us to fail. Well, but then that's going to ruin everything, and it's going to You can't hold us up. You can't regulate us into success, but you can hold your boundaries. And the firmer the boundaries, that doesn't mean we have to be mean. We can be very compassionate and loving with our boundaries. They just are what they are. But until the addict is convinced It's on here somewhere. Let me see. Yeah. Until the addict is convinced there is no more rescuing coming, we will not make any change. If we think we've got one more, we will hold out for that. And some of us can milk that for a long time. It's like, our families will say, you know what, this is it. We're done. We're not, we'll help you get better, but we're not going to help you die. Well, I can't tell you how many times I heard my mom say that. I know it's not real. I know, she said that last time. And then we're really good at playing, no, I was doing so good, but then, somebody came to my work and they had some pills and I didn't, it wasn't my fault. And we're really good at playing the victim. So even though the addict hears no, we don't believe it for a period of time. So you might have to ride it out for a while. Sometimes we accept that no quickly, and sometimes we accept it slowly. But if our families will hold the line, we will arrive at that place. Well, what if they die in the process? That's the spiritual part of this. That's where we've got to surrender them to God and say, this is your thing. All I know to do is help them get sick. You know how to protect them. You know how to keep them safe. You know how to keep them from overdosing, and rely on that. And what happens, I'm telling you, 98% of the time is the addict starts getting better pretty quickly. And when I say getting better, I mean is willing to put one routine or one responsibility next to another responsibility, next to another responsibility, making our bed, eating breakfast, taking a shower, following instructions, doing those things we don't want to do, which always leads to change. Okay, I promised I wasn't going to go over, but I did. But a lot of family dynamic here tonight in the room. Do you guys want to share anything before we cut it?
I know in early recovery, I mean, I see a lot up there, and the embarrassment, the guilt and blame, the questioning self, and then one of the big things, I mean, you know this, but you still try and do it anyway, that, controlling other people's behavior, you have to let that go. And once you can let that go, it's a huge relief. It's a huge,
So it is possible.
It's possible. It is possible.
Yeah. To be able to gain some peace, even though the other person hasn't changed yet.
Right.
And that's really powerful.
And I wouldn't have been able to do any of those things without Al-Anon.
Yeah. That's really, really powerful. And it ends up being the best thing that ever happened to us. It's that it's everyone's got varying degrees of these things, but I know that it was almost when I saw my family doing that, I interpreted that as apathy, and started thinking, oh my God, the jig is up. This is it. I mean, I'm at the end of the road. Of course, that wasn't happening, but that was my distorted interpretation. It worked. For whatever reason, it does work. When families are willing to take care of themselves, doesn't mean you've got to stop loving, stop, disconnect, all that stuff. Some people do that. As family members, we get so hopeless and helpless that we'll just disconnect and call it tough love. Well, we did the tough love thing. They haven't gotten any better yet, but I know we haven't talked to them in 3 years, and that's just the way it is. What that is, that's a family trying to survive, trying to protect themselves, but not necessarily in a super healthy way. What if it was possible, and of course it is, but what if it was possible if families could heal and change, the patient could heal and change, and have a completely different family dynamic. It's the same. It's, there's promises for the recovering patient, and like in the AA Big Book, there's some promises in there that if we'll do these things, we get some pretty amazing outcomes. It's the same thing for families. And I don't know if they list that in the Al-Anon book. I'll have to look that up. I'll bet there's some promises in the Al-Anon book. Where are they the same?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to use that more. I think I've got one in the office. Okay, thank you all. I hope we tried our YouTube experiment again. I hope I didn't mess it up this time.
Yeah,
And okay, good. I'm gonna let my engineer sign us out. And thanks for watching on YouTube.